That was the last conversation 17-year-old Ethan had before he died. He wasn't trying to get high, he wasn't an addict. He thought he was buying a prescription painkiller, something regulated, something safe. But the pill he bought was fake. It was made to look like a Percocet, stamped, colored, identical. But inside, it wasn't oxycodone. It was fentanyl. 2 milligrams, that's it. An amount so small you can barely see it, can shut down your breathing in minutes. And in the United States, over 100,000 people die from drug overdoses every year. That's one person every 5 minutes. Most of those deaths involve fentanyl. But here's what didn't make sense to me. How does something this small end up everywhere? How does a fake pill kill someone in a suburban bedroom after being ordered on a phone? Because what killed Ethan didn't start with him. It didn't start in his city. It didn't even start in this country. It started as a part of a system, a global system that is almost invisible until it isn't. This is where the whole thing begins. A pill, small, familiar, trusted. For decades, pills like this came from one place, pharmacies. Highly regulated, precisely measured. If it said 30 milligrams, it was 30 milligrams. No more, no less. There was trust in the system, but that system started to change. In the early 2000s, opioid prescriptions surged across the United States. Drugs like oxycodone became widely available and widely misused. Then came the crackdown. Doctors pulled back, regulations tightened, prescriptions dropped. But demand didn't go away. It just moved. From pharmacies to the internet, from doctors to dealers, and from regulated pills to something else entirely. Because criminal networks realized something. They didn't need to grow drugs. They didn't need farms or fields or even much space. They could manufacture pills cheaply, quickly, at scale. And instead of using traditional opioids, they started using fentanyl. Because fentanyl is different, it's synthetic, which means it can be made in a lab. No crops, no seasons, just chemistry. And more importantly, it's incredibly potent. A tiny amount can produce the same effect as much larger doses of other drugs, which makes it perfect for one thing: profit. Smaller shipments, higher potency, bigger margins. So these networks begin pressing fentanyl into counterfeit pills, designed to look exactly like real medications. Same color, same marking, same size. But here's the problem: there's no quality control, no regulation, no consistency. One pill might have almost none, the next might have a lethal dose. And there's no way to tell the difference, not by looking, not by taste, not by experience. Which means when Ethan bought that pill, he wasn't making a calculated risk, he was playing a game where the rules have changed. And he didn't even know it. Because by the time that pill reached his phone, it had already traveled thousands of miles through a supply chain that spans continents. To understand how this happens, you have to follow the pill backwards, all the way to where it begins. If you want to understand this, you don't start here. Because by the time this pill reaches someone like Ethan, the story is already over. So instead, you go backwards. Start with the final step, the moment just before the pill changes hands. In many cases today, that doesn't happen in some dark alley. It happens through a phone, a message, a social media account. Dealers advertise openly, Snapchat, Instagram, and encrypted apps. You don't need connections, you don't need networks, you just need a search bar. And when the exchange happens, it's fast, local, almost invisible. But this part, this is just distribution. It tells you how it moves at the end, not where it came from. So go one step back. Before the street level, before the phone, before the local dealer, this pill was somewhere else. Most of the fentanyl entering the US today comes through the southern border, but not in the way most people imagine. Not massive shipments, not obvious cargo, because it doesn't need to be. When something is this potent, you don't need volume, you need access. So it moves in small amounts, hidden in vehicles, concealed in packages, carried across legal ports of entry. And here's the problem: the system at the border was built for flow, trade, movement, millions of people, millions of vehicles every year. It was never designed to detect something measured in milligrams, which means even if most of it is caught, enough gets through consistently. Now go back one more step. Before it crossed the border, before it was hidden, before it was distributed, this pill didn't exist yet, because this is where it's made. Across parts of Mexico, fentanyl is manufactured in small scale labs, not fields, not plantations, labs. And that changes everything because traditional drugs like heroin depend on land, time, harvest cycles. Fentanyl doesn't. It's synthetic, which means production can happen anywhere, anytime, at scale. Chemicals come in, fentanyl is produced, then pressed into pills designed to look exactly like prescription drugs, like the one Ethan bought. And from a business perspective, this is almost perfect. Cheaper to make, easier to transport, more potent, more profitable. But even here, this isn't the beginning, because to make fentanyl, you need something else. Precursor chemicals, the building blocks, and many of those chemicals originate in China, inside a massive global chemical industry. Now, this is where things gets complicated, because these chemicals aren't always illegal. Many have legitimate uses: medicine, manufacturing, agriculture, which means they can be produced, sold, and shipped through normal global trade. Every year, hundreds of millions of containers move across the world. Most are never opened, they can't be. The system wouldn't function if they were. So instead, it relies on probability, sampling, risk detection, and that works for most things, but not for something measured in milligrams. So now, if you map it all together, you get something like this. Chemicals produced legally move through global trade. They arrive in Mexico, where they are turned into fentanyl. That fentanyl is pressed into pills, moved across the border, distributed locally, sold through a phone, and eventually ends up in a bedroom on a desk in someone's hand, like Ethan's. And once you see the full path, something changes, because this doesn't look random anymore. It doesn't look isolated. It looks structured, not controlled by one person, not directed by one decision, but shaped in a way that produces the same outcome over and over again. Which raises a different question. If the system is this visible, why does it keep working? At the center of this system are the groups moving the final product, cartels. And for them, fentanyl changes everything. Because compared to drugs like heroin, fentanyl is cheaper to produce, easier to transport, and far more potent. Which means one thing: more profit from less. A kilogram of heroin requires land, labor, time. A kilogram of fentanyl requires chemicals and a lab. So when fentanyl enters the system, it doesn't just participate in the market, it reshapes it. But cartels don't operate alone. They depend on supply. And upstream, that supply begins with chemicals. Many of those chemicals come from China, from a massive industrial network that produces materials used all over the world. Now, it's important to be precise here. Not every producer is doing something illegal. Most operate within legal frameworks. These are legitimate businesses selling legitimate products, but some of those products can also be used to make fentanyl. And in some cases, those chemicals are sold with little friction through online marketplaces, exported internationally, and end up in the wrong hands, which creates something unusual, a system where legal activity feeds into illegal outcomes. And this is where things get harder to define, because the system isn't clean, it's layered. Some parts are legal, some parts illegal, some parts somewhere in between. And when a system operates like that, accountability gets blurry, because no single point controls the entire chain, which makes it harder to shut down. Now zoom out, look at the outcome. In the United States, over 100,000 people are dying every year. Healthcare systems are strained, communities are destabilized, resources are stretched, and all of that is happening internally. So from a global perspective, this raises a difficult question, not about intent but about incentives, because if a system exists that produces these outcomes and operates through a mix of legal and illegal layers, what incentive is there for every part of that system to fully stop? Think about it, what it would take. Stricter chemical regulation, tighter global trade monitoring, deeper international cooperation, financial tracking across borders. All of that is possible, but none of it is easy, because each step comes with trade-offs, economic costs, political friction, diplomatic tension. So instead, what you get is something more subtle. A system where producers keep producing, traffickers keep trafficking, distributors keep distributing, consumers keep consuming, and no single layer has enough pressure or enough incentive to stop the entire chain. Which means something important. This system doesn't need coordination to keep going, it just needs momentum. But even that is only part of the story, Because this system doesn't hit every country the same way. So the next question is, why here? Why does this land so heavily in the United States? Fentanyl exists globally. It moves through multiple countries, but the scale of death is heavily concentrated here. And that tells us something important. This isn't just about supply, it's about vulnerability. To understand fentanyl, you have to go back before synthetic opioids, before illicit pills, to legal ones, prescription opioids. For years, pain in America was treated aggressively. Doctors were encouraged to prescribe opioids. Patients were told they were safe. And pharmaceutical companies reassured everyone that addiction risk was low. That turned out not to be true. Eventually, regulations tightened, prescriptions dropped, access changed. But addiction didn't disappear, it adapted. People who were already dependent started looking elsewhere. First heroin, then fentanyl, because fentanyl was cheaper, stronger, and everywhere. But that's still not the full picture. Because addiction doesn't spread evenly, it follows fault lines. Communities hit by job loss, declining industries, and long-term instability are more vulnerable. Access to treatment isn't equal. Mental health care isn't consistent. Recovery support isn't always available or affordable. And then there's something harder to measure: isolation, disconnection, lack of support systems, all of which make people more vulnerable not just to addiction but to relapse. Now bring fentanyl back into this, because fentanyl doesn't behave like other drugs. It's unpredictable, invisible in counterfeit pills, measured in micrograms, which means the margin for error is almost zero. So when fentanyl enters a system that already has high addiction rates, uneven healthcare, economic stress, and social isolation, it doesn't just add to the problem, it amplifies it. And that's what makes fentanyl different. It doesn't require long-term addiction to be lethal. Sometimes it only requires one moment.